Upon release, Hostel 2005 was controversial, to say the least.
Environment we have, the fear and terror and everything else. The last thing we'd want to be in theaters is terrorized.
After seeing the film, New York Magazine writer David Edelstein coined the term torture porn, a mantra which seemingly defined a subgenre of horror for the better half of a decade. Despite his success as a director and a cumulative box office earning of $475 million, in the modern day, Eli Roth's filmography remains somewhat niche, with many finding his brand of frat boy humor off-putting, if not grossly offensive.
Well, there is a problem with this film. The protagonist taking sexual pleasure from the torture and killing of the victim.
Growing up in the 2000s, Hostel was a movie that needed no marketing. Nobody's parents would let them watch it, but everybody had seen it. In the 90s, big-name horror was still finding its footing in the hangover of the 80s slasher boom, giving us self-aware titles like I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legends, and Scream. In comparison, the 2000s, aka the post-9/11 era, felt decidedly darker. This is the era that gave us J-horror remakes like The Ring and The Grudge, as well as gritty 70s reboots like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003 and Halloween 2007. We also had no shortage of innovative newcomers like Saw, The Descent, Paranormal Activity, and Cloverfield. At the time, it felt like a horror renaissance. Yet despite the steep competition, relative newcomer Eli Roth managed to make a splash, reeling in $82 million off a $4.8 million budget. Hostel had everything a studio could ask for: a massive box office return, constant coverage by establishment media, and instant cult classic status resulting in free word-of-mouth marketing. Yet despite the infamy that Hostel enjoys to this day, many people would be surprised to hear that the film received not one, but 2 sequels. Which begs the question, what happened? Well, before I can answer that, I'd like to roll back the clock to Eli Roth's debut film, which is lesser known but arguably more fondly remembered. That film is, of course, Cabin Fever.
And I made a cameo in the movie, and I'm the guy holding the dog, and right before one take, I had to spend like an hour petting this dog because it would bite my head off, and then I was rolling the camera, and I went, okay, action, and the dog jumped up at me and just started humping my leg, and I was going, Rock, you're already cast, you already got the part. You don't have to do that anymore.
Roth's love affair with film would start when he was just 8 years old, in his hometown of Newton, Massachusetts, where he would create nearly 100 short, home movie-styled films with his brother. This fascination with storytelling stuck around, and Eli Roth attended New York University's Tisch School of Arts, where he created the short student film Restaurant Dogs, a film that won a Student Academy Award in 1995.
Hey, McPhee! Take care!
While at NYU, Eli Roth worked as a production assistant on Howard Stern's Private Parts, and interned under producer Friedrich Zollo. Perhaps most importantly, Eli Roth began co-writing the screenplay for Cabin Fever with his New York University roommate, Randy Perlstein. Roth shopped the script around for 6 years, getting passed up by multiple studios, before partnering with indie producers Lauren Maus, Aaron Atrosky, and Sam Froelich. Together they raised $1.5 million, though with some investors dropping out, Roth drew $100K from his father when needed. Fortunately, things panned out in a major way. After premiering at Toronto's Midnight Madness in September 2002, Lionsgate bought distribution rights for $3.5 million, making it their highest-grossing film of 2003. While I'm sure many horror fans are aware of this film, I feel it's important I provide a brief description of Cabin Fever, as I feel it really sets the tone for what you can expect from Hostel, and indeed Eli Roth's entire preceding career. The film follows 5 college friends, renting a cabin in the woods to celebrate the end of finals. Our cast is a collection of reliable but well-worn tropes and stereotypes. We have the sweet but socially awkward protagonist, the humorously belligerent frat boy, the confident pretty boy, the hot slutty chick, and the girl next door, who acts as the object of our protagonist's affections. The story starts off by ticking all the boxes for a city slickers meets rural-styled horror until our crew are accosted by a forest-dwelling hermit who is seemingly infected with Giga AIDS. They evict him from the party, but unfortunately damage their only means of transportation in the process. To make matters worse, members of the crew start showing signs of a flesh-eating, body horror-styled illness. The ensuing confusion and mayhem quickly turns character tropes on their heads, as our team is forced to contend with this deadly disease and an increasingly violent local population.
The
There's conflicts, there's discovery, there's sex stuff. However, despite their best efforts, the cast dies off one by one, but not before discovering the town's water supply is infected with the deadly virus. It also turns out that the water supply is the source for a popular bottled water company. This acts as the perfect setup for a sequel we'll likely never see. And that's Cabin Fever. It's pretty standard horror fare, but Roth's execution was flawless. The film blends comedy, body horror, and self-aware genre subversion in a way that still feels effective to this day. The film grossed an impressive $30 million against a $1.5 million budget. Most importantly, it caught the eye of Quentin Tarantino, who called Eli Roth the future of horror.
I've now officially seen Cabin Fever about 7 times, and I watch it with if a girl comes over, it's like a good movie to watch it with him. And I just think he's just a terrific director. He's the director that horror films have been waiting to come out.
This was the start of a fortuitous relationship between the two directors, with Quentin Tarantino inviting Roth to direct the horror short/fake trailer Thanksgiving for his Grindhouse project.
This holiday season, prepare to have the stuffing scared out of you. Thanksgiving.
While Tarantino had no part in the funding of Eli Roth's next project, his endorsement drew boatloads of financiers. And with that, Roth's sophomore film and the topic of this video was funded. Now, I am a massive fan of Hostel 2005, and while it's undoubtedly remembered as a genre-defining film of a less-than-loved genre, I feel it is yet to be given the modern reappraisal that it truly deserves. I'm of the opinion that there's a lot more going on under the hood than people give this film credit for. But before I can get into that, we'll need to run through the plot. Hostel follows 2 American college students backpacking across Europe with their Icelandic friend Ollie.
This is Ollie, the king of the swing.
In Amsterdam, they visit a series of bars, brothels, and nightclubs, but are ultimately unable to make it back to their hostel due to curfew. By happenstance, they end up at the apartment of an Eastern European man named Alexei, who convinces them to forego their trip to Barcelona to visit a hostel in Slovakia, known for hosting sexually available women who adore Americans. On the train ride to Slovakia, they encounter a very disturbing Dutch businessman who eats salad with his fingers. While some may take this as foreshadowing of some creepy European stuff to come, our trio are undeterred. Fortunately, they find the hostel to be just as advertised. Upon arrival, the crew are quickly seduced by 2 sexy ladies, Natalia and Svetlana, and they spend the night partying and engaging in casual sex. The atmosphere is indulgent and dreamlike, reinforcing a sense of false security. Upon the next day, the illusion begins to unravel when Ollie disappears without explanation. The hostel staff provide vague answers, saying Ollie checked out, and Josh and Paxton grow increasingly suspicious. Despite these red flags, the pair decide to party it out for another night. After a long night of revelry, Josh awakens drugged and disoriented. He's been taken to an underground facility, where he's been chained to a chair in a dim industrial torture chamber. The spooky Dutch businessman from the train proceeds to torture and eventually kill him, revealing the central premise of the film, the existence of a secret black market organization known as the Elite Hunting Club, which allows wealthy clients the opportunity to pay to torture and kill human victims. Paxton, who managed to narrowly avoid capture by passing out in the storeroom at the bar, returns to the hostel to find that he and Josh have been mysteriously checked out. Unaware of Josh's fate, Paxton continues to search for his 2 friends, before being lured to the very same underground torture facility by the attractive Slavic ladies. The rest of the movie is an Orpheus-style escape sequence, with Paxton tested to his absolute limit, escaping the Elite Hunting Club, all the while learning about their practices and the deranged patrons who enjoy the services they provide. On its surface, Hostel feels like a fairly standard horror movie that just so happens to feature an abnormal amount of sadism and gore relative to its contemporaries. However, Roth's script provides quite a bit more to chew on. Perhaps by happenstance, the now cult classic teen sex comedy Eurotrip was released just a year previously in 2004.
What the hell are you doing?
Oh, mi scusi.
No! Mi
scusi.
Going into Hostel blind, you might assume these films were cut from the same cloth. The first act of the film features the same kind of lighthearted debauchery, gratuitous nudity, stock characters, and even lighting of early 2000s comedies. As a result, the descent into visceral horror around the second act is made all the more jarring. Part of me wishes there was a way to market this film without revealing the horror twist. In addition, Hostel plays with character tropes in a way that was pretty fresh in the early 2000s. Despite his early death, Josh was very much written to be the final boy. Compared to Paxton, he's meek and kind, introverted but emotionally intelligent, and the primary focus of the first act. Keeping in the theme of subversion, as the film progresses, we learn our stock douchebag Paxton is actually more complex than initially presented. He's intelligent, brave, secretly bilingual, and surprisingly selfless. I think one of the elements that really carries this movie for me is learning about Paxton in real time. The guy basically becomes the main character halfway through the film, and he does a great job of it. Hostel also features a poignant, albeit blunt, commentary on the flesh for fantasy industry, with the elite hunting club being an obvious analogous for the very real-world horror that is sex trafficking. But again, many viewers will have already seen this movie and hopefully enjoy it for the same reasons I do. What I find to be arguably more interesting is the sequel and why it foreshadowed the end of the franchise almost immediately.
There was a moment earlier where Charlie pulled out the lipstick and tried to have sex with Vera. That was interesting. Not the first time that's been attempted on this set by a cast or crew member, but certainly the first time an animal has tried to have sex with a cast member. That I know of.
Right off the bat, the first thing you'll notice about Hostel Part 2 is it looks like shit compared to Hostel 1 and Cabin Fever. It's washed out and muddy in some scenes, and in others it's overly contrasty with a bizarre lack of mid-tone values. The dynamic range feels half, with characters' clothing, something we should definitely be able to see in fairly well-lit scenarios, sometimes registering as pure black. Everything is desaturated and smeared with this pukey yellow. The highlights are blown out in almost every scene. There are portions of this movie that are just an incomprehensible mess, with the Harvest Festival scene standing out as particularly difficult to visually decipher. Having recently seen Green Inferno, which Eli Roth shot on a Canon C300 and was also an overexposed mess, I assumed Hostel Part 2 had to have been shot on some early digital Cinecam. Much to my surprise, this was not the case, as Hostel Part 2 features the same Ariflex cameras, 35mm film stock, and director of photography as Hostel 2005. I honestly found this information to be very surprising, and despite my best efforts, I could not find any explanation for why these two films look so drastically different. Maybe it was an artistic choice, maybe the scans currently available on Amazon are a botch job. Regardless, it was very jarring watching these two films back to back and was consistently distracting throughout. But enough kvetching. Hostel Part 2 starts off shortly after the events of Part 1. We are briefly reunited with Paxton, who has managed to make it back to the United States and is hiding out in a remote cabin. Traumatized by the events of the first film and suffering from PTSD, Paxton's paranoia is slowly driving a wedge between him and his newly acquired girlfriend. Unfortunately, Paxton's fears prove to be justified, as he is ultimately tracked down, decapitated in his sleep, and his head is delivered to the elite hunting club. The narrative then shifts to our new girl crew of protagonists, Beth, Whitney, and Lorna, who are studying art in Rome. The trio are convinced by the attractive and charismatic news model, Excele, to accompany her on a luxurious spa vacation in Slovakia. Unbeknownst to them, Excele is working with the elite hunting club, and once in Slovakia, lures them to the same hostel featured in the first film. While checking in, the clerk scans their passport photos and uploads them to an elite hunting club website that allows patrons to participate in an online auction to pick their preferred victim. The narrative shifts again to our secondary POV characters, American businessmen Todd and Stuart, who place the winning bids on Beth and Whitney. Back in Slovakia, the girls attend a harvest festival where they mingle with locals as well as Todd and Stuart, who have made the trip over. An inexperienced drinker, Lorna gets wasted and separated from the group, becoming the first victim. Assuming Lorna is probably just out getting laid, Beth and Whitney spend the next day at the local spa. While there, Beth falls asleep, awaking to find her belongings and Whitney missing. While searching for Whitney, she's pursued by several shady-looking men and narrowly escapes by heading into the woods. There she's intercepted by Axele and her wealthy older friend / Anthony Hopkins lookalike, Sasha. Unfortunately, they're not there to help, and Beth is ultimately taken to the newly renovated torture facility. There, Todd and Stuart are gearing up to do the deed. Initially gung-ho, Todd wusses out while torturing Whitney and attempts to leave the facility. This is apparently against Elite Hunting Club protocol, and they kill him. Stuart, who is apparently far more insane than initially presented, kills Whitney and attempts to rape Beth. Fortunately, she's able to get the upper hand and holds him hostage in order to negotiate with the Elite Hunting Club. As it turns out, Beth is unimaginably wealthy and is able to purchase her freedom as long as she also agrees to kill Stuart. Visual presentation aside, Hostel Part 2 is not a terrible sequel. The film has some enjoyable characters, with Lorna being a personal favorite. I also think it's interesting to give audiences a look into the minds of the kinds of people who would pay for the Elite Hunting Club services. That being said, you may have noticed from the plot summary that Hostel Part 2 has a lot more moving parts, and that's not necessarily a good thing. Quite a bit of screen time is devoted to world building and exploring the Elite Hunting Club as an organization. While this does introduce some fun gimmicks like the online auction sequence, it also spoils some of the mystique and introduces some confusing business practices. In fact, the more that is revealed about the Elite Hunting Club, the less frightening and, worse yet, less plausible it seems. It's established in the prologue that the Elite Hunting Club's reach is global, as they're able to track down Paxton all the way in the United States. Throughout the movie, we see that the club has also implemented significant upgrades to the facility, both in tech and staffing. In Part 1, the Elite Hunting Club felt like a mysterious and esoteric entity, tucked away in the former Soviet bloc. Aesthetically, it was ramshackled, claustrophobic, and seedy. It seemed able to operate because it was a lean organization with a small footprint. In the sequel, it feels more like a well-oiled machine at the center of a global conspiracy. It could be argued that the club's growing list of wealthy and influential clients would facilitate expansion, thanks to increased financial and political capital. This may be true, but at the end of the day, the hordes of uniformed guards, fancy control rooms, and apparent web development team just isn't as scary as a few Slavic goons traipsing around an abandoned factory. I also feel like killing Todd and Stuart was an odd move on the part of the Elite Hunting Club. Getting away with abducting young backpackers seems fairly plausible, but these are two wealthy guys with jobs, mortgages, and presumably families with the financial means and political connections necessary to instigate a fairly thorough investigation into their disappearance. All that aside, it just doesn't seem like a great way to generate repeat customers and positive word of mouth. Finally, I feel like the sequel just lacks the thematic weight of the original. Though not explicitly stated, Josh, Paxton, and Ollie were engaging in a form of sex tourism, so there's this sense of irony when the roles are reversed and their flesh becomes the commodity to be bought and sold. Hostel Part 2 was not nearly the box office success of the original, raking in just over a third of the international gross against double the budget. Both Lionsgate and Roth, who spoke about the issue at length on his MySpace blog, blamed the disappointing performance on the leak of an early work print, which gained sizable circulation via DVD street vendors and BitTorrent. While piracy and MPA meddling was undoubtedly a factor, the so-called torture porn genre as a whole was in a state of decline. Contemporaries like the Saw franchise had already peaked in 2006, and we're seeing diminishing returns with every subsequent release. Unfortunately, things only get worse from here.
What happens in Vegas?
You like freaky?
Yeah.
Stays in Vegas. But for an unlucky few, losing big is lethal.
As I stated before, Roth did not return to direct Hostel Part 3. In fact, he wasn't connected to production in any way. No longer produced by Lionsgate, the project was funded independently, with Scott Spiegel tapped to act as writer and director. Interestingly enough, Scott helped to co-write the screenplay for Evil Dead 2 with longtime friend Sam Raimi. That may sound like impressive horror pedigree, but I think it is worth pointing out that at the time, Scott's only notable directing credits were for direct-to-VHS schlock like Nut House and From Dusk Till Dawn 2. While Spiegel's filmography didn't exactly instill confidence, plenty of horror franchises have managed to survive or even catch a second wind under the stewardship of a new director. In theory, creating a Hostel sequel that, at the very least, treads water shouldn't be too difficult, as the first two films firmly established the formula. If you wanted to play it safe, it would probably be wise to include an eerie location in the Eastern Bloc or a similarly remote foreign nation, excessive amounts of gore achieved via practical effects, and finally, I can't believe I have to say this, but a hostel. Well, in a move that is consistently baffling to watch unfold on screen, Scott Spiegel opted to include none of those things, instead setting Hostel Part 3 in Las Vegas. Viva Las Vegas! This is just one of the many terrible decisions in Scott Spiegel's script, and I intend to go over the plot thoroughly so I can discuss each one individually. The film starts off with an Elliott Smith-coded American checking into a hotel. He arrives to the room to find that it is still occupied by a rather shady-looking Ukrainian couple. For fans of the franchise, this is likely raising some red flags. It's an awkward situation, but the American decides to break the ice by offering his newfound friends a beer. By the way, the beer in question is apparently just called Pilsner. Very minimalistic branding. Immediately after drinking the beer, the Ukrainian couple pass out, and men in black suits enter to retrieve their bodies. Now, if this opening scene wasn't the result of one of the worst premises in the franchise, this could be considered a cute twist on the formula. Like now the shoe's on the other foot, and Americans are kidnapping spooky Eastern Europeans. Though for me, this seems like one of those ideas you'd come up with while out drinking with a few friends and quickly discard the next morning. As a side note, much of the tension in this scene is undercut by actor Nicola Shirelli's complete inability to do a convincing Ukrainian accent. For reference, Nicola was born in Detroit, and it shows. Next, we are introduced to Scott, who is the epitome of a generically attractive white guy. There's really not much you can say about this character other than he's sort of loyal to his fiancée and seems very fond of his friends. Scott is due to get married to his beautiful fiancée, Amy, and is hitting Las Vegas for a weekend bachelor party with a few friends. Right off the bat, this is kind of an issue. In previous Hostel movies, victims mostly consisted of young backpackers thousands of miles away from their homes. It could be days or even months before anyone would know they're missing, and the police in their home country would be almost powerless to investigate the disappearance. Kidnapping well-to-do young professionals/homeowners in their own country is a totally different undertaking. In the first two films, it's heavily implied the elite hunting club has the Slovakian police in their back pocket. This is fairly plausible as Eastern Bloc nations tend to have corruption problems. Covering up this sort of international kidnapping ring would be very fucking difficult in the United States. And why even risk dealing with American victims when you can simply traffic over people from less developed nations? It really stretches credulity, and I just think a lot of these questions could be avoided by sticking to the European setting. Regardless, once in Vegas, we are introduced to Scott's boy crew. First, we got Carter, Amy's former flame, who is by all accounts a pretty fun dude, who embodies the lovable asshole archetype. Next, we got Mike, who is a total degenerate alcoholic, also pretty cool. Finally, we have the nice guy of the group, Justin, who is weirdly queer-coded and has cerebral palsy or something. At first, the gang congregates at an apparently boring casino featuring strippers that don't even show nip. Fortunately, they quickly bump into two escorts, who inform them that the real place to party is at a spooky warehouse in the industrial district. The movie really wants you to think this might be the point where our heroes are abducted, however, the suspense is short-lived. As it turns out, this was the intended location of Scott's bachelor party all along. The crew engages in much debauchery and revelry. There are strippers here who do show nip, and we're treated to this absolute banger of a line from Mike.
Indy 500. One more.
As the night begins to wind down, Scott ends up in a private room with one of the escorts, and things start getting a little sexual. Scott ends up shutting things down before it goes too far, confirming his status as nice guy protagonist who will make out with random hookers but won't actually go all the way. The night finally caps off with a scene reminiscent of the first Hostel, in which Scott is seemingly drugged and gets locked out of the nightclub. This scene also features a second fake-out where it's implied Scott may be abducted by the intimidating Middle Eastern cab driver. Ultimately, Scott wakes up back in the hotel room with Carter and Justin. Unfortunately, our god and party king, Mike, is abducted by the elite hunting club. In the preceding scene, we are introduced to this film's twist on the franchise. As I stated earlier, in previous films, the elite hunting club provides victims for wealthy sadists to torture and kill. This is, of course, horrible, but it does feel very plausible. It's scary because it's so similar to real-world issues like sex tourism and human trafficking. It also plays on many people's fears about what powerful elites may be getting up to behind closed doors. In Hostel Part 3, this is not the service that the Elite Hunting Club offers. Instead, club patrons attend a sort of live snuff film demonstration where they have the ability to place bids on the cause of death and gamble on various aspects of the slaying, like how many wounds can be inflicted before the victim passes. I don't know how this could possibly be considered a game of chance, by the way. It seems very easy to rig, and the Las Vegas Gaming Commission should definitely look into it. Visually, this is a massive downgrade from the first two films. In Hostel 1 and 2, the abandoned factory does a lot of the heavy lifting. The building is in a state of decay, with cracked concrete walls, damp floors, and dimly lit hallways. It's an extremely foreboding place that contributes a lot to Hostel's dark tone. Unfortunately, the Elite Hunting Club's Vegas franchise is not cut from the same cloth. The kill room is brightly lit, clean and sterile. The tools of torture look brand new, as if they were still on the shelves of a Home Depot. The room where patrons sit is adorned with velvet curtains, plush leather couches, and soft accent lighting. I understand this aesthetic ties in well with the Vegas location, but it's just not scary. We've basically gone from Dracula to Dorsia, and conceptually it feels nowhere near as plausible. I can definitely believe that there's guys out there like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos who want to pull an Asian chick's eyeball out to blow off some steam. But what's the target market for this setup? You're telling me there's enough gambling addicts who are also snuff porn enthusiasts to keep this business model afloat? Anyways, some guy cuts Mike's face off in a very unimpressive special effect that mostly just looks like raspberry jam. Back at the hotel, the boys are becoming concerned about Mike's absence. They assume he may have stayed the night with one of the escorts and make their way over to her trailer home. And as no one appears to be home, they break in. Now, I want to take a moment to highlight a small detail that really pisses me off in this scene. To show just how dank this escort's trailer is, they add a shot of this cockroach. Problem is, this is not the kind of cockroach you find in American homes. This is a Madagascar cockroach, which are mostly kept as exotic pets. The fact that they thought they could slip this one by when most horror fans look like this is crazy. Trust me, anyone watching a direct-to-video Hostel sequel knows what a cockroach looks like. Anyways, escort number 2 shows up at the trailer and informs everyone that escort number 1 is also missing. Meanwhile, back at the Elite Hunting Club, escort number 1, who has also been captured, is about to become the next victim. The method of murder: asphyxiation via cockroaches. You would think she would have an immunity to these things, considering they're apparently crawling all over her apartment, but no, they just scurry down her throat in a really poorly executed CGI sequence. Meanwhile, our main cast receives a text from Mike's phone, telling them to meet up at escort number 1's hotel room. They arrive, and unfortunately, it's a trap. They're captured by the Elliot Smith-looking guy and whisked away to Elite Hunting Club's headquarters. Skipping to the goods, our next main cast member to die is Justin. In yet another baffling decision, they wheel out this weird BDSM mask lady to dance around and shoot him with a crossbow, while onlookers make bets on how many bolts it will take to finish the job. This definitely isn't as lame as the cockroaches, but in general, the kill sequences in Part 3 have nowhere near the bite and gravity as the first two films. Hostel Part 1 in particular puts our characters through the ringer. We're talking crying, puking, pissing their pants. Eli Roth seemed to prioritize blunt realism over creativity, and as a result, it feels less like you're watching a movie and more like an extended cartel beheading. In Hostel Part 3, these scenes just feel like a tedious break from the plot. Moving on to the climax, our extremely underdeveloped main character, Scott, is the next to enter the kill room. In yet another twist, it turns out that Carter is actually a patron of the elite hunting club and set up this entire bachelor party weekend as an opportunity to kill Scott to get back together with Amy. Unfortunately for Carter, the elite hunting club are operating on Hostel Part 2 logic and make the bizarre business decision to release Scott so that the two can fight to the death for their entertainment. Predictably, this allows Scott the opportunity to escape and call the police. Next, the film devolves into total action schlock with explosions and shootouts after the elite hunting club activates the building's self-destruct sequence. Ultimately, Carter escapes, and Scott is seemingly burned to death in a fiery explosion. Later, back in what I presume is California, Carter is comforting Amy, who is grieving the unexpected death of Scott. In the final twist of the film, it turns out Scott is alive and somehow managed to beat Carter home with third-degree burns in order to plot with Amy to exact revenge. Together, they tie up Carter and murder him in brutal fashion. And so ends Hostel Part 3, and for that matter, the entire Hostel franchise, in a piteous whimper. I have to say, I don't understand this ending. While Scott is kind of a blank slate, it does seem odd that he would forego medical attention and police intervention in order to rush back home to exact the most brutal revenge possible. Amy choosing to take part in this violent killing is even more bizarre. Character motivations aside, it's a logistical nightmare. It's established at the beginning of the climax that the police are on their way to the elite hunting headquarters. Are we as an audience to assume Scott evaded the authorities, boarded a plane, and got transport back home faster than Carter, all while looking like Two-Face? And what's the next move? Amy and Scott are just going to hide the body and play stupid when people come around asking questions about the disappearance of his three best friends? How anyone saw this script and greenlit $6 million, $2 million more than Hostel Part 1, by the way, is beyond me. While Hostel Part 3 is host to numerous issues, both in the script and Spiegel's direction, many of my problems with the film were already present in Hostel Part 2. I believe the continued attempts to expand on the elite hunting club as an organization fell flat, shedding light on mysteries best left to the imagination and ultimately muddling the focus. It's possible there exists a writer-director team capable of building on the foundation set forth by Hostel Part 1, but both Roth and Spiegel fell short of the mark. And as a result, the franchise atrophied with every subsequent release. As a franchise, Hostel has never been held in particularly high regard. Despite this, the first movie in particular holds a special place in my heart. For this reason, I find it very sad that for the last 13 years, Part 3 has stood as the send-off for the series. As of writing the script, it has been announced that Eli Roth is developing a follow-up TV series with Paul Giamatti in the leading role. In all honesty, I'm not that optimistic. I just hope it's not another exercise in diminishing returns.